Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of this week's episode of the Incline Dodgers podcast. Your Los Angeles Dodgers 2024 World Series champions. No need for a reminder, but we're going to gloat about that all season long because the Dodgers did it, and why not brag? All the haters can just cry out there. So grateful to be joined by a friend of the show, Michael J. Duarte. He is one of the best writers and reporters out there, and you can follow him on NBC LA. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for having me on. I'm going to let people come into this chat for a second and get their questions and stuff ready. And I'm going to go grab my parrot who's talking. And so I don't want him to interfere with this podcast. So give me 10 seconds and I'll be right back. And then I'll show you guys this cool Jackie Robinson hoodie I got on too as well. Give me 10 seconds.
Awesome. That's care of business. So, first of all, little housekeeping. If you haven't subscribed to the Incline Dodgers podcast yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, turn the notifications button on so you're notified every time we go live. And while you're here, hit that like button because we'll be covering off-season content all season long, getting you ready for the 2025 MLB season. The Silver Slugger Awards came out today, and Shohei Ohtani, Teoscar Hernandez, Mookie Betts, and the Los Angeles Dodgers team as a whole took home Silver Slugger Awards, and a nice little payday for Teoscar Hernandez, earning an extra $1 million. There's Michael showing off the cool Jackie Robinson hoodie that he's got representing. No, there you go, number 42. So we've been following Michael all season long, and he did tremendous coverage for the Dodgers. And he's here tonight to kind of talk about firsthand what it was like covering this championship squad. But if there's anything first, Michael, you wanted to talk about first, more than happy to hear what you want to get out there.
No, I want to talk about the Dodgers. I want to talk about how everyone out there is feeling. Kevin and I, before we came on, were talking about how even though it ended the perfect way you want it to, right? It ends with a parade. It ends with a celebration at Dodger Stadium. It ends with the 8th World Series title in franchise history. There was no better ending to this season. We got what we've been wanting for over a decade now in Dodgers Yankees. Everything is amazing, but yet I'm like still craving more. I'm going through like withdrawals, guys. I want to know if like the fans and listeners out there are missing the Dodgers or missing the boys in blue, even though there's no more baseball left to be played. They won the final game of the season. That's all you can ask for. I find myself missing being at the stadium, missing the players, missing the guys. I'm kind of like tuning into all the players' social media to see what they're up to in the off season already. I've already seen Mookie at like 3 sporting events. And so I've gone up and said hello to him. And when Freddie went on Jimmy Kimmel, I was telling Kevin, like I watched that whole thing. When Flaherty went on Cowherd and Eisen and some of these shows, I watched that whole thing. And then even last night, the Dodgers have this like 30-minute video called like the Road to the World Series, where they kind of rehashed everything from the day they won the NL West all the way to the parade. I watched that whole thing again last night. I'm still craving like this ride. I still want to stay on the wave, if that makes sense. I'm not ready to move on to Lakers and Rams, which I have to for my job, but I'm not like emotionally there yet.
I watched the same video, and it's just so nice this offseason compared to the last couple ones in particular, because having your season end around October 10th or whatever it was, and then just watching all the other teams battle it out for another 2-3 more weeks really stung, especially when the Dodgers had high expectations. This season, it ended on October 30th, and the next day was Halloween, and we kind of just got to enjoy the holiday and now the month of November, and the off season's already really up and moving, especially if you're the Los Angeles Angels. And here the Dodgers are kind of a little bit behind the scenes, more just celebrating right now. And I'm perfectly happy celebrating the offseason as opposed to some of the big moves that the Dodgers have already been linked to. And we'll talk about that later in the show. But I mean, for now, it's kind of just basking in the glory and reflecting on what a tremendous and special season and great group of guys we got to watch this year.
Yeah, I see Alex saying they missed Teo being in a Dodger, not being in a Dodger jersey. She's still in a Dodger jersey, I guess, technically, right? I know he posted that goodbye on Instagram, but he's a guy that I know the front office is targeting. I talked to Brandon Gomes a little bit around after the parade and after the season. You know, after the season he had, winning the home run derby, being the kind of MVP of that locker room, being the emotional guy, being that high energy guy that they wanted, the way he bonded with his teammates, and they really, really talked about his locker room presence as far as being a kind of a Dodger in that regard and being a leader and learning by example. He's a guy I definitely know they want back, and he's deserved whatever payday, he has coming to him. He risked it all with that 1-year deal and was able to cash in. And obviously, watching the video you just talked about, Kevin, look, the Yankees could have self-imploded with those 3 errors and mental mistakes they had in that 5th inning in Game 5, but without Freddie's single and Teo's double off the wall, they wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't be here. They could have gone to a Game 6 or 7, and so we really need Teo back. The one thing I want to share as we go into some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that you wanted to discuss, Kevin, was watching that video we just talked about. It was really interesting for me, and I'm glad I did it last night before coming on here and joining you with everyone here, watching live and putting in their comments, because it was almost like I got to, when you're reliving it in real time and you're on the field and you're in the locker rooms and you're in the press box and you're in the locker rooms after the game, you're living in the moment and you're kind of just like the players. You're going through the motions and you're doing everything one pitch at a time, one bat at a time, one game at a time. You're not looking ahead. You're not thinking about when the end is coming. I remember they showed, if you remember, Game 4 in San Diego, the 8-0 bullpen shutout game, right? Mm-hmm. I remember being on the field before the game and we all got the alert Freddie wasn't playing. And if you recall, there was a bit of gamesmanship by the Dodgers that day. I guess Freddie had finally said the rib was too much and he wasn't going to be able to play. We know that now. I didn't know that at the time. We all thought it was just the ankle. And he had told him before the game that that morning he wasn't going to play at breakfast, but yet they still put him in the starting lineup that was first released. And it wasn't until like maybe an hour before first pitch, they announced a new lineup and Freddie wasn't in it. And this is coming on the heels of Miguel Rojas making the error with his oblique injury. And he was out. And in fact, he really never played again or started again the rest of the way. And so we looked at this just from the media side on the field about an hour before first pitch. We all get the same alert, all of us guys. Jeff Passan, Ken Rosenthal was all with us too. We all find out there's no Freddie. You're down 2-1 in an elimination game. Your back's against the wall. You're starting Ryan Brazier in a bullpen game. This team has seen your best relievers the last few games, not the one prior to that in the blowout, but they had seen him in Game 1. They saw him a little bit in Game 3. And so, and there's no Freddie, there's no Miggy Rowe. And we were like, they're effed, guys. They are so effed tonight. This season is going to come to an end. This is so disappointing. They imploded in that second inning in San Diego in Game 3. If they don't do that, maybe who knows? And so to go from that moment where I literally felt like that could be the end of the season again, right? And another disappointing and same old, to now what I'm feeling now and what we all saw, and to be able to kind of go back and see it again and reflect back on that journey, that was pretty incredible to me, because that was one of those moments where I looked at it and was like, this could be the end. And obviously they turned the tables and it wasn't. In fact, San Diego didn't get another run again for the next 2 games.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was shocked to find out Freddie Freeman was playing with the damaged ribs. I had no idea, like you mentioned. I thought it was just the ankle injury. So the fact that he was able to homer in 4 consecutive World Series games with all the injuries that he was plagued by is just one of the most superhuman things I've ever heard of, like in my entire sports fanhood. So that's really impressive. Speaking of that, kind of like, what was your interpretation of kind of preparation or pre-game stuff that you saw maybe in the first round versus the latter rounds?
Yeah. So, and we know a lot of it. I can't give too much insight, I suppose, in the sense, I mean, I can give you everything I got, but what I mean by that is it's not anything that we haven't heard from the players now that they've gone on late night talk shows or gone on podcasts or spoken to us. We've heard a lot about it. The big thing so we were out there, I think they only took off after the regular season ended like 1 or 2 days, and then they immediately started going into workouts. If I'm recalling correctly, like I was at Dodger Stadium 3 days before the NLDS started, 2 games before, 1 game before when the Padres showed up. and then obviously the start of game 1. And they had done that before in years previous. Last year specifically, they brought in fans. They wanted to see if maybe having fans show up for a team workout like a scrimmage would kind of simulate a game and inspire them in a weird way. The year before that, they decided to rest more, and they wanted to see if like really getting a rest and healing would have been the way. And obviously those two things didn't work out. What they did this year is, as you were hearing from the players, as decided upon by Freddie, Max Muncy, Mookie Betts, Kershaw, those guys, was to have team watch parties where they would watch the wild card series at Dodger Stadium in the clubhouse together and just be together and hang out and be close, stay close, and try to focus on baseball as much as they could. And no wives or kids were allowed during these watch parties. And the Dodgers are notorious for letting wives and kids come to the games, be on the field before the game, be on the field after the game, hang out, do anything they want. The players tell me they like that. But this period between the end of the regular season and the start of the NLDS against the Padres, it was no distractions, no kids, no pets, no decoy for Ohtani, no wives, no nothing. And it was just focus on baseball and being with the boys like 8 hours every day, like you would come to a job. Reminds me of the show Severance, which I watched on Apple TV, and a season 2's coming up, where like you literally disconnect from your family life and you go into the work, and it's like a completely different life for 8 hours with those people. And then you go back out and you don't even have any recollection of it. And that was kind of what the Dodgers wanted to replicate, was just for those 8 hours, we're at the field, we're doing our work, but we're together. And that closeness, I think, brought this team together in moments where that game 4 where Freddie and Miggy didn't play, and the guy's like, we got you. We're going to pick you up tonight. You know, when our back's against the wall, we're going to pick you up. And it wasn't even like Freddie not being in the lineup that made me think they were kind of going to be screwed in game 4. Excuse my language, Kevin. It was his defense, you know? Like Max can't pick the ball like Freddie can. He can't reach further the way Freddie can. Kike Hernandez can't play short the way necessarily that, and Tommy Edman for some of those games, the way that, you know, Miggy Rowe could, who's a great defensive shortstop. It was more the defensive end against a really strong team and well-balanced team that San Diego had me worried. But obviously the closeness of this group was like, doesn't matter if Tyler Glasnow goes down or Clayton Kershaw goes down or Brusdar Graterol goes down. Someone will step up. They stay together. They don't let go of the rope, which is a cliche that you hear a lot with teams. And that kind of got them through the tough times. One thing I can tell you, and they have talked about it already, when they got through that San Diego series, all the players told me off the record, at least a half a dozen, that to them felt like their World Series. That they thought was the best team they played. They looked at the teams that they could play moving on, whether it be the Mets, the Guardians, or the Yankees, and they said, no one's going to have the starting pitching that the Padres have. They're all going to have really good hitters, but no one's going to have the depth and balance in the lineup where they got guys who can hit for average like Luis Arias, Jerickson Profar that they have. No one's going to play as good a defense as this team has. No one is going to have 3 all-stars in the back of their bullpen that the Padres had. They all felt very confident that getting through them, there was going to be nothing that could stop them. They obviously took everything seriously and these teams seriously and took it one game at a time. And they knew how hot the Mets were coming in, but they really felt like with their scouting and preparation, once they got past the Padres, that if they played their game and didn't shoot themselves in the foot, that they would win the World Series. And sure enough, that's how it played out.
Yeah, I mean, that checks out. Like the Padres defense as opposed to the Yankees defense, it's night and day. Like the Padres have assembled one of the best defensive lineups out there in Major League Baseball, and the starting pitching was just far superior without a doubt. I wanted to kind of circle back to something you mentioned early on in your talking points, the watch parties. I can't speak to how they prepped in the past, but one of my criticisms was I felt like in the past they weren't watching enough tape, or they weren't invested enough in watching these games. And I don't know how true that was, but to hear what you were saying and kind of to reiterate how they focused on the games this season, had the watch parties, and were all in, like, I feel like that was a big difference in their approach, because one of the things that scouts talked about was the Dodgers lacked adjustments in the previous 2 postseason series. And like a perfect example would be Merrill Kelly, a guy they pummeled all regular season long. And then Merrill Kelly kind of flips what he normally would do against the Dodgers, and they couldn't hit him. Zach Gallen, another example. And so I felt like they were very prepared for a guy like Dylan Cease. They were all over his pitches. They were all over Michael King, who they got to watch in the wild card series. And then obviously that translated against the Mets and the Yankees. Sean Manaea, they got to him a second time through. And with the Yankees, they had no trouble really with putting the ball in play, at least with Garrett Cole.
Yeah, throughout this playoff run and in previous playoff runs, I don't want to say it was just this year alone, but the scouts were so important. The Dodger scouts who scouted these teams, who scouted the opposing pitchers and really gave these guys, they get like a little booklet before every game to prepare, which is, and they customize it to each player, knowing what information they want, the nitro zones, against where they succeed against the opposing pitcher, where the pitcher likes to pitch certain guys, righties, lefties, guys who hit for power, guys who hit for average. And so they have all the information available, and they really credited the scouts for being able to tell them things. And especially in that Yankee series where you heard what Joe Kelly said afterwards, which was, and we knew that before the series even began in the media, like we had been told the same thing, like the Yankees are going to run themselves off the bases. They're a terrible base running team. They're a terrible team defensively. If you just put the ball in play, let them make mistakes, they will implode. And we knew that going in. The funny thing was the Guardians were supposed to be a better defensive team and a better base running team. And they played kind of what they called Guardian ball or whatever with their head coach. But they were the ones kind of who imploded against the Yankees in that series. I thought it would have been a longer series. And that's another thing to think about when the Yankees wrapped that up in 5 after Cleveland imploded in that game in game 5. It was almost like, I know fans in New York were freaking out when I was at Citi Field and for game 5 when they kept Flaherty in and he gives up 8 runs in the first 3 innings. And they're like, why aren't they going to the bullpen? Why is they doing this? And I was like, because they're going to punt this game. They're going to take it home. They're going to have everyone rested, whereas the Mets are going to use everyone. They're going to win it in 6. And by winning it in 6, the World Series will start as originally planned on the 25th instead of getting bumped up to the 21st or whatever is going to be. And that extra rest is going to help guys like Brusdar Graterol, Alex Vesia, Freddie Freeman, Miguel Rojas, who all were on the World Series roster. It ended up being huge that NLCS between the Mets and Dodgers went 6 games and didn't end in 5 the way everybody wanted it to, because you would have had the World Series bumped up. And had you bumped it up, my guess is Miggy Rowe, Vesia, and Graterol probably are not on the roster, and Phillips as well. And you could be looking at a completely different series without those guys the way they were used. So that's important, these little small moments. What I'm getting to, though, Kevin, was this series, I felt Dave Roberts managed it much, much differently than he's managed past series. And I know he gets so much slack for his decision-making and leaving guys in. And so if we're going to give him the slack, and sometimes it's rightfully and justifiably deserved, then you also have to give him his flowers when he absolutely puts on a masterclass. And we're looking at like Carlos Mendoza and Schilt are finalists for the NL Manager of the Year right now. Those are 2 managers. Not only did he beat on his way to the World Series, he outmanaged them like by a lot, by a very wide margin. And so to that point, Dave made decisions like in game 2 and 3 in those losses to the Padres to just let him go. Like punt the game, put in my low leverage guys, save my big guns for when I need them. He was also not afraid to just stay to guys' lanes and roles. If you needed, I thought the best relief pitcher on the team was Michael Kopech. That's a guy that when I came on your show, I said, this is a guy they're going to get at the deadline, and they ended up getting him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the best reliever. He was the closer, but they didn't care. They put him in the 3rd inning, the 4th inning, the 2nd inning, 6th inning. It didn't matter. Dave was like, if I need to get out of this inning and keep the momentum and shut these guys down, and I know these guys can't hit velocity, so if a guy's coming in throwing 102, and usually it was the heart of the lineup, he'd bring him in whenever. Same thing with Trinan, same thing with, Vesia in certain cases. He hasn't really done that before. It was always like Kenley's going to get the 9th, and he would blow it, or so-and-so is going to get the 7th or the 8th, and this was the way he always did it. Brandon Morrow, Kenta Maeda, those were always like, they had their kind of lanes and roles, and he rarely adapted. I thought he adapted in the 2020 World Series, and I felt like he did a great job of that now. The biggest thing that I saw that I had never seen before was he literally punted games. He punted game 4 of the World Series. The Dodgers were like, take my pawn right? They were playing chess out there.
Yeah.
Take my pawn in game 4. Take a World Series game. We don't care. We're still going to win this thing. And it's the cojones to do those things in the playoffs, to literally concede games by using your low leverage guys, ultimately ended up paying dividends because it kept the guys healthy and ripe and ready. And the other team had to use all their high leverage guys, and they eventually came back to bite them. And I think that's something Dave had learned even happening to his teams in past series that you didn't see this year. The other thing I'll address was your adjustments you were talking about. I don't know. Maybe they didn't adjust back, but you're right. Like, it's hard when I'm sure the booklet they got for Merrill Kelly and for Zach Gallen last year in the NLDS showed what they'd been doing the whole regular season, and tip your cap to Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly to say, we're going to do the complete opposite because we know what they're looking for. And it worked for them. And also going up 6-0 and getting these big leads early. Ask any starting pitcher. That is huge.
Yeah.
To have a big lead early. It changes the complete way you play the game. You're not afraid of a solo shot. You attack guys. You're more aggressive. You play these, you play them, you just play the game and pitch the game differently than if it's a tight game or a close game or a 0-0 game. So anyway, one thing I thought about, there was a lot of talk in the postseason about the teams of like the Diamondbacks and the Rangers and the teams that have caught fire as a lower seed and made it all the way in the past. They've said that these teams tend to be free flowing, right? They'll swing at the first pitch. There's no plate discipline, and that might not work in the regular season, but it works in the postseason. There was topics and discussions within the Dodgers organization to play that way this postseason to try to replicate what other teams have had success. It was Max Muncy who really put his foot down and said, no, we're going to do what we've done all year. And them and the Yankees were the most plate disciplined teams the entire regular season. They saw the most pitches. They didn't swing it at balls outside the zone. And they did that again in the playoffs. And it worked, especially in that Mets series where they broke the record for the most walks in a single series. And there were certain pitchers like Jose Quintana comes to mind, a couple of Yankees guys as well, like Severino in the Mets series. Rodon is another example of this. Guys who like to paint the corners and make you chase. And if you don't chase, you're not going to go into their game plan. You were talking about strategy and game plan. And they didn't chase, and they got those guys out early, even if they didn't necessarily put up the big runs. And once they got to the bullpen, they blew it.
Kodai Senga, game 1.
Mm-hmm.
It made him work, and it completely backfired.
Correct. And that was something that was not necessarily different, but they kept what they normally do. They kept the success. They didn't panic or frazzle or try to change plans in the moment.
Yeah, and maybe it's luck, maybe it's the adjustments, maybe it was the game planning, but the Dodgers were down 5-0 against the Yankees coming into that 5th inning, and they were able to tie it up. I don't know if the last 2 or 3 Dodgers teams that they rolled out there would have had the same fight in them, but this team, no doubt about it, showed the fight, and it didn't matter what the deficit was. I mean, even when they were down 5 or 6-0 against the Padres, when Teoscar hit that grand slam, they were almost back in that game too. So just a really good, will-powered and well-managed club by Dave Robertson. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. He was just sensational this season as the Dodgers manager, and a lot of growth and praise deserved for Dave Roberts. So before we get into like the offseason and free agency and trade rumors talk that I know a lot of people that tune into the show want us to cover, just want to kind of get your feelings and kind of how it felt for you to cover the Dodgers in a World Series at Yankee Stadium. Was that like a surreal feeling for you?
I mean, I've covered them at Fenway. I've covered them in Houston. That was a nightmare stadium scenario with that stupid train every time they hit a home run that rolls out in the left field. Covered them in a bubble in Texas and Arlington in a World Series, and now at Yankee Stadium. By far, this was the best. Man, oh man, like Ice Cube coming out for game 2. Freddie with channeling Kirk Gibson with a walk-off in game 1. Fat Joe's dud of a performance in game 3. Yeah, I mean, I got to walk around Yankee Stadium a bit. By the time we had gotten to like game 3 and 4, they were like ready to concede. most of the fans I thought were like, great job. You guys are going to win. Even if it goes back to LA, we're going to lose in 6 or 7. Like they didn't think, and they were really respectful about it. They booed vociferously Freddie Freeman. They booed the heck out of Shohei Ohtani, which the kind of classless nature they were cheering when he hurt his shoulder in game 2, you know. But yeah, it was a pretty, I don't want to say surreal, but just epic. It just had this epic vibe to it. I've been talking about Dodgers Yankees since like 2015, 2016, right? Like they were both good and we felt like they were on a collision course and everyone wanted to see it because it's like Lakers and Celtics. It's the rivalry, it's the history behind it, it's the times they've met in the World Series. And we thought we were going to get it in 17. We didn't. We thought we might get it in 18. We didn't. We thought we might get it in 19. And it just never happened. So to finally have it happen when they, had the best records in each other's league, they were the number 1 seeds overall in both leagues. And they have the 2 MVP, soon to be MVPs in Ohtani and Judge. You couldn't have asked for anything better. I would have just loved to see Tyler Glasnow be able to be a part of this entire playoff run. And I really think, some of these games, the Dodgers might have just steamrolled some of these teams had Tyler Glasnow been healthy and ready to go for some of this. But some behind the scenes stuff, let's see, that I can think of. It was fun in New York, both Yankees and Mets, was all the families were there. They all got to travel with the team. There was multiple planes that were flying them over. And so all the families and kids were there. And so you would see them hanging out and playing in the hallways outside the locker room before and after every game. I remember after game 3 against the Mets, Walker Buehler pitched a gem and he was there with his wife and his newborn. And we were chatting after that game. We chatted after the World Series with his family. By that time for the World Series at Yankee Stadium, his mom and dad and sister had all shown up. So everyone had their not only their immediate family, but their extended family there as well. So that was really cool to see. Clayton Kershaw playing with his 4 kids and the World Series trophy on the field at Yankee Stadium. And for me, after the champagne and beer celebration, going out onto the field at Yankee Stadium and walking out to the dugout and going inside the dugout, or sorry, not the dugout, the bullpen, where, the guys warmed up, where Walker Buehler walked out in like the 5th inning and then was hiding kind of in the back. There's like because it's cold out there, there's like a glass room behind the bullpen where you're warming up that guys are kind of hanging out. I got to walk in there and see it. I really did my best, Kevin, to like soak it all in. I took pictures on the mound. I took pictures at the plate from behind home plate. Obviously the celebrities that were involved between New York and LA, these 2 big cities and big markets. You couldn't have asked for anything better. I got to see some of the behind the scenes stuff that Freddie had to do every day, the treatment he had to do to get on the field throughout the playoffs. Guys, if you had known, we're talking like 2-3 hours and he wouldn't even do any baseball work. And when he did do baseball work, he'd kind of come out and do like 15 minutes of like light jogging, stretching drills, his little infield drills he does with Dino Ebel, some grounders at first, some kind of double play stuff, maybe run the bases a little bit and then go back and get treatment, where like everyone else is just in the cage, whether it's in the cage below or taking BP or taking batting practice, taking grounders, fielding. Freddie wasn't doing any of that and still was able to post, which was pretty impressive for me to watch him. Shohei relaxing, watching comics on his iPad. He's into like anime comics. He's always watching that. He does it on team flights. That was very cool to watch. And people know it now, but like he stayed behind. And I think I reported at the time after he injured his shoulder, by the time the game ended, he was already heading for the elevators and I passed him in the elevators. And that's not normal for him. My understanding was he went straight to get in an MRI machine. He got more tests and went to see more specialists the next day. The team flew out that night and he didn't go with them. He flew the next day on his own. He had his own security guard with him as he was arriving to Yankee Stadium before game 3. So what he was going to do was very interesting to see. That was kind of the behind the scenes stuff that was interesting. Also pregame before every game, especially on the road, the locker room was just calm, cool, collected, confident. Nobody panicked. The only one who kind of lost their cool was Jack Flaherty after his game 5 performance in New York. I've never seen him so angry and so like mean to the media and stuff, which changed by the time the parade came. But yeah, the parade was amazing. The celebration, amazing. The entire thing just had this epic feeling about it, like I said. So yeah, I don't know if there's any more insights I can share. I'll try. I don't know. I guess the last thing I would say was being at Yankee Stadium and watching that fifth inning with all the Yankees fans around. That felt really good. That felt really,
Yeah.
really good. They were turning on their team. They were booing. They were cursing. They were screaming. They were yelling, "Fire Aaron Boone!" And this is something like only like New York and Philly fans kind of do, right? Where they turn on their own team like that. Like I was telling guys, like it's 5-0 in the fifth inning. Garrett Cole has a no hitter. Like we're going back, but we'll win it in 6, right? Or we'll go back home, but we can win it in 6. We can win it in front of the fans. Everybody will be happy. And suddenly that fifth inning turned completely, and I just couldn't believe it. So watching that at Yankee Stadium and seeing how the fans turned on their own team and their own manager so quickly was enjoyable. Was really enjoyable.
It's awesome stuff. Well, thank you for sharing all that, Michael. That's really good insight, and I'm just so glad we came out on top this time. All right, so a few people have reached out to me, and we've continued to talk about him. So now it's time to get your thoughts on this Japanese sensation. And shout out to A for bringing him up, Roki Sasaki. I don't know how much you know about this guy, but I'm sure you're in the loop of just how high the Dodgers are on this guy. Do you feel like Roki Sasaki is at the very top of the Dodgers target list?
Yes. Yes.
That's how I felt too. Okay, so I mean, we've kind of gone into depth in the past. Like, it's not going to cost a lot to sign him, just based off kind of the situation of him bouncing from Japan early, essentially, and it's going to come down to Roki Sasaki choosing his next destination. It does feel like it's going to be between the Dodgers, Padres, and maybe the Yankees. If you had to guess, with all things considered, you feel like Roki Sasaki and the Dodgers are a match made in heaven?
Yes. That doesn't mean I know what Roki Sasaki is thinking.
Right.
And what is important to him. Here's what I can say to you guys, right? They've been after Roki Sasaki for quite some time. They've scouted him. Andrew Friedman has gone on trips to watch him with other members of the organization. They have let him know for quite some time, for many years, he's a target of theirs. He's a guy they want. They didn't spend any of their $2.5 million international signing bonus in 2024 so they could have the most money to offer him if he were to get posted. And that's exactly what's happening now. So it's kind of the best of both. I don't know. There's a lot of this made, right? If Roki had waited 2 more years, a la Yamamoto, the team would get more. His team would get like 50 million, and Roki could sign whatever contract he wanted. Yamamoto's would be a baseline. So this guy could be looking at 250, close to 300 million, the same kind of deal that Yamamoto got. So a lot of pundits out there are thinking it's absolutely crazy that he's telling his team he wants to get posted. Now, the team doesn't have to post him. I think they're doing what the player wants in this situation, because they're also shooting themselves in the foot, because they're going to cost themselves tens of millions of dollars. They're going to get 25% of whatever he gets. It's going to be a minor league contract like deal. The Dodgers can actually offer him the most of any other team if the deal gets done before I don't know the exact date, but it's like December 7th, I think. So if the deal gets done before December 7th, it's the 2024 signing bonus money that comes into play. If it's done after that date, then the coffers get filled for some of these teams, and so they can maybe offer more again. But the Dodgers have been, by saving that 2.5 million, they let it know that they were going to put all their chips in to get Roki. And so he's going to make a good amount of money, and all he has to do is wait the 2 years, and then he can sign a huge deal after that. So what he's doing, for your listeners right now, is he's doing the Ohtani deal, right? Gamble on yourself, come out early, get used to major league pitching, the American lifestyle, all of that stuff. Post, you have 2 years to do it. Not as much pressure as if you were the 350 million guy like Yamamoto. And if you do what you do and your talent rides out, then you get an Ohtani-like deal the $700 million deal that he gets. So everything the Dodgers have done points to they want this guy, and they're going to be able to offer him more than any other team to get him if it happens before December 7th. There was an era when it came to Japanese players where they wanted to be, again, a la Ohtani when he signed with the Angels. They wanted to be the only Japanese player on the team. And I think what Yamamoto and Ohtani and their friendship and their buddy that we got to see this year, especially in some of those champagne celebrations that I even filmed and posted for you guys to watch, I think a lot of other Japanese players now look at it and be like, maybe it wouldn't be the best thing to be the only player. Maybe it's good to have other players who are going through the same thing that we can hang out with, go out to eat with, do things with. I just think it's and I think there's a lot of Japanese players who watched this last World Series run with Yamamoto and Ohtani and said, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And Roki Sasaki was on that Team Japan Samurais World Baseball Classic team with those two guys. I'm sure he might love to play with them again because obviously they won it all there. I don't know how you can't watch this Dodgers run as any competitive baseball player and say, I want in on that. Yeah. Right? And to fans who are out there, and you mentioned the Padres are in on him, right? And I think one of your people in the comments, and we should really go some of these comments. I haven't had a chance to go through them. Shout out to Justin in Lyon, France. I'm a Marseille guy myself, but shout out to Lyon. I think that so the information I was going to give you was the Padres are in on Roki as well. Obviously, Darvish was on that team. They invited Roki to come out in person to watch Game 4 at Petco Park of the NLDS. And the Dodgers went out and shut him out 8-0 and hit a bunch of home runs and won it with a bullpen game. And I don't know if that's a great selling point if you're Roki Sasaki to see that. I don't know. I know Ohtani grew up wanting to be a Dodger, and the Dodgers were in on him since high school. And if the DH was in the National League when he first came out, he'd probably go straight to the Dodgers and not the Angels. I wouldn't have been surprised about that. Yamamoto, same thing. Yamamoto could have been with the Yankees and other teams. He wanted that too. It just feels like Roki is plan A for the Dodgers. And if he wants to win and he wants to play for those guys, he's going to be a Dodger.
Yeah.
If Roki is thinking, no, I want to beat those guys. I want to create my own dynamic duo with Darvish and then go beat those guys. And I don't know if those are his thoughts. Then San Diego probably comes into play. And if he's like, I want to be the only Japanese pitcher on a staff and be my own guy, then maybe, like you said, the Yankees or another one of these teams could be in play. But to me, I think if you're coming out this early and this young, development's important. I don't think any team can do what the Dodgers do and make the same case that we're going to develop you and we have this amazing pitching staff and we bring out the best in guys. I don't think anyone can have that. And I really again, I don't know, but it seems like since LeBron James went to Miami, the modern day superstar and athlete wants to team up with other good, talented players and have fun and enjoy it. And I covered a little bit of Angels these last 6 years. I have never seen Shohei Ohtani so happy than I saw him this season. And that's what winning does. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Roki Sasaki is a Dodger.
Yeah, I think the dynamic completely changed 2023 with the World Baseball Classic when a lot of these guys got a taste of what it's like to play with one another. And that was probably a huge selling point for Yamamoto to team up with Shohei Ohtani. And not to repeat too much what you just said, but yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense if you're a guy like Sasaki and you just watched Ohtani and Yamamoto have fun, win together. Why wouldn't you want to be a part of that? And so I do feel like the Dodgers and Sasaki are a very strong match made in heaven. And I'd be kind of surprised if it doesn't happen at this point. The only team I can really see stealing him away would be the San Diego Padres for kind of the points you already mentioned. So yeah, I want to encourage everyone to get your questions in there. We got some free agents to talk about. Justin Yamas, you're next. This is a loaded free agent class with starting pitchers. You've got Corbin Burns, Max Fried, Blake Snell, among other guys. Is there a particular name that either you have interest in or you feel like the Dodgers have stronger interested as opposed to the other cats out there?
So the way Andrew Friedman operates, whenever I've talked to him and whenever it comes to trade scenarios and deadlines, and like, in the past, it's why like I would just kind of tweet out like these are guys that they're interested in, right? There's usually a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, right? You explore all of them, you make the calls on all of them, you see where things are at, you see what it'll cost you, and then you start to execute those things. We can look at this last year because Corbin Burns trade was something the Dodgers were interested in, but they wanted Willy Adames back in that deal. I don't know if that was plan A. It seemed like the Brewers didn't really want to sell some of those guys. I didn't think they were going to end up moving Burns. I didn't think they were going to move Adames at all. They did end up moving Burns. So sometimes you get an offer you can't refuse, but it seemed like they wanted to compete. So they weren't necessarily ready to move off of those guys. The Dodgers, had interest in Dylan Cease as an example. So they had different plans. When the Glasnow one opened up, I don't think that was necessarily plan A, but it might have been like plan B. But it looked like that was the one we can get right now. And if we wait, we lose it. And so they execute it. So with that said, I think Roki Sasaki is plan A.
Yeah,
I really, really do. They've been working on this for years. They think they can get him. And again, unless Roki says, no, I want to play against these guys and beat them and form my own dynamic duo, like you said, or if he wants to be the only guy. I know I've heard some of his quotes in Japan. He said he wants to be the best pitcher like in the world. And I think you can still do that on the Dodgers. You do that wherever you go if you have the talent.
Mm-hmm.
And if you win titles, then it even boosts that opportunity to do so if you can rise and ascend to become the ace of the staff. But he's still he's still not a finished product. He needs a few more years. And so I don't know. It depends. If he thinks he's going to be in Yamamoto and Ohtani's shadow when it comes to being on the mound, then maybe he doesn't. If he thinks I can be better than those two guys, then maybe he does. So it'll be interesting to see on that. But that to me is plan A. I think just because they were interested in him last year, Corbin Burns might end up being plan B here with like Max Fried to plan C. I know they were in on Garrett Crochet. I think they'll probably go back out and see if the White Sox are willing to move him in this offseason. I think they are. I think he will get moved. I don't think Skubal's going anywhere. That was another guy we talked about at the deadline. I told you I didn't think the Tigers wanted to move him. They were still in like compete now mode and also looking to the next year. And the fact that they not only made the playoffs, but won the first round and made a pretty deep run tells me he ain't going anywhere. They're just going to reload and build around him. So I can see Burns like being by being B, Crochet maybe C, Max Fried. He's a little bit older, got a little more mileage on the tires, has dealt with some injury things. So I don't think he's high up on the list. I know everybody just wants him to come home because he's a Harvard Westlake guy. And, you just brought in Jack Flaherty. I don't think he's as high as everyone thinks on the list. I think Walker Buehler coming back now is high on their list if they can do it. I think he would have been a sure bet to potentially come back had he not had the playoffs that he had. I think he earned himself a big contract somewhere. And I don't know. I don't know what's in Walker's mind. I wouldn't be surprised if Walker Buehler was on another team next year. And I know that's not what fans want to hear, but knowing the compete that he has, knowing where he's from and where he spends most of his time in the offseason out there in Kentucky, I wouldn't be surprised if, he got an offer that blew out the Dodgers, what the Dodgers could offer financially, if he decides to go elsewhere where he can be like an ace of a staff and really go out and prove himself in a different market. Obviously, we know Kershaw is going to come back and probably won't be ready for opening day. There are some guys down next year, like Gavin Stone's going to be down. River Ryan is down. Mm-hmm. But presumably you're going to get Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin back. So, you have some depth. But I think what they saw this year is it doesn't, even when you think you have amazing depth in today's modern day pitching, when guys are dropping like flies and, throwing 100 miles per hour and having all these arm injuries, then you can never have too much depth. And so that's going to be an issue too. I don't think Jack Flaherty returns. I know everyone wants him to return. I'd be surprised if he did, but that's another plan on those rungs. Maybe he's plan F, you know what I mean? So hopefully I kind of rang down some of the plans for you, and it just kind of, they're going to check in on all those and they're just going to see. But I think Roki's number one, and that's the first domino they need to fall before
I agree. I agree 100%. I think plan B is a couple guys you mentioned. I think they're kind of in the same tier. Blake Snell and Garrett Crochet, both these guys, the
Oh, I forgot
Dodgers
about Snell. You nailed Snell, yeah.
these
'Cause I
guys.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
sorry. No,
Us-
I was gonna say, we talked about this at the deadline show. They wanted Snell as a free agent last year, but they wanted him on a short-term deal,
yeah,
and he ended up going to the Giants on a short-term deal instead, and then they inquired about him at the deadline, but I don't think the Giants were ready to sell yet, be full-time sellers, and I don't think they wanted to trade the best second-half pitcher in baseball over the last handful of years in the division to the Dodgers.
right.
Um, I could see, because he's a lefty, and that was something they lacked this year's rotation, and they probably will lack a little bit next year. I could see them going on him. He might be plan B or C. Yeah, I forgot about him, but you're right.
Yeah, I was. It's exactly what you just said. So the Dodgers, when they want to trade for someone and he becomes available, they revisit that situation, and that's exactly what Blake Snell's about to be. And then with Garrett Crochet, obviously they were very aggressive in on him. They had a number of competitive offers. White Sox just didn't bite; it fell through for the contract and all those reasons. We presumably assume Crochet is available again. We've already heard the Dodgers are aggressive and are trying to put together another trade package for Garrett Crochet. And like, the more I think about it, the more I think he's the perfect fit for the Dodgers. He's only 25. He had a great season last year. I know that people are worried that durability could be a concern. He's never thrown crazy amount of innings throughout his career, but he stayed healthy last season and he can only get better. So I think the Dodgers and Garrett Crochet, they're not going to give up Dalton rushing, but I think they can put together a pretty competitive package. And it just comes down to, can they outbid the Phillies, maybe the Orioles, and another mystery team? But I think Crochet is someone high on their list.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Crochet gets moved. I think he really does get moved, and it'll be interesting. But that goes to the plans, right? Like, him and Snell, I kind of put in that same category. The Dodgers also look at things as if, like, one is a free agent, the other is going to cost you prospects. You just spend more money and you get the free agent. You know what I mean? Than necessarily trade. Now, obviously, that's how they had to get Glasnow, but the free agent pitching market was a lot different last year than it was this year. Obviously, they were able to get Yamamoto. That was their big fish, but they knew they needed more, and so they went out and got Glas. And now I feel like they know they have Glas, Yamamoto, and Ohtani ready and healthy for next year. And so there's a person in your comments asking, could they get Max Fried and Sasaki? I think it's just one right now, and then maybe some lesser pieces for depth pieces. Whereas Fried, Burns, Sasaki's not going to cost them a lot, obviously, but Fried, Burns, Crochet, Snell, these are like ace of the staffs. They're going to get big money, right? I don't think they're going to get multiple of those guys, is what I'm thinking here. So, could I see them re-signing Teo, signing Adames, and getting Sasaki? Yes. But then I think that would move them off Max Fried and Snell and some of those guys.
Speaking of Willy Adames, are you a Willy Adames guy? Do you think he fits well for this Dodgers team? Do you think he's overrated? Or do you think he's kind of not a missing piece because they just won, but a piece that would certainly help this Dodgers team?
100%. I think they're confident that there is some interesting factors here and something you didn't talk about, like in a Crochet deal. I could see Gavin Lux getting moved and
Yeah.
being a big piece of a trade like that. The reason why I say that is they have talked about not only just this year and next year, but moving Mookie to the infield, making him the starting second baseman. I think they're going to move off of Lux at short. I think they see Miguel Rojas as a backup, as a veteran. Obviously, they're bringing him back for next year. They want a starting shortstop. They wanted it to be Adames last year. They tried to trade for him. It didn't work. Now you can get him as a free agent. If they do that, to me, that's your starting shortstop. If you move Mookie Betts back to the infield, which is what he wants and what they want to extend him for the life of that deal, he's your everyday second baseman. What does that mean for Gavin Lux? Gavin Lux ends up being the odd man out. And if you can trade for another starting pitcher like a Crochet, I think that's a guy that would be big trade bait, especially he had a pretty good playoff run. He had a pretty good World Series as well. People forget he knocked in the sac fly that tied the game before Mookie won the game in Game 5. So to me, there's a lot of I think there's gonna be a lot of Gavin Lux trade talks here in this offseason. And Willy Adames would be a perfect guy to slide over and be your starting shortstop next season. And I definitely think Teo's on the list, but Teo's going to be able to dictate where he wants to do. He's going to have a lot of offers this offseason and can really cash in if he wants.
I've been trying to trade Gavin Lux for like a year now, and they're monitoring what we're saying on social media, because after Gavin Lux took Peralta deep, he DM'd me like 4 minutes after the game ended, talking
Gavin
me.
did?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
He told me to shut up, basically.
Nice. I like it.
So no, I agree with you. I agree
Let's
with
see
you.
what else. I'm going to go through. You bring up what's next. Okay, you brought the next one. I think I answered that already, right?
You covered it. I mean, James Fields just dropped. What about Kike Hernandez? To me, he seems like a easy re-sign.
Correct,
I don't
100%.
think we need to talk about him, but
He loves it here. This man loves it. If you saw his Instagram post, they put a billboard up of him downtown with his, I think he's Adidas. He's an Adidas brand guy. And then someone did a mural for him somewhere in LA, and he was taking photos with that and his daughter with him. Obviously, he went to Raising Cane's. He's not. He wanted the opportunity after they won the World Series in 2020 to play every day, to prove he was an everyday starter. He got to do it. He got hurt. He didn't post. He posted a little bit in the postseason that first year with the Red Sox. Then he fell off to the point where the Red Sox were just willing to cut bait and get rid of him at any cost. I think he loves just being a utility guy, and then when it comes to the postseason, being the guy. And he loves LA and he loves the Dodgers, and so that's an easy one to come back as well. My hairstyle, there's talking about. I wasn't a big 98 Degrees guy, Borat Otani. I'm sure that's your real name. But it's kind of giving like NSYNC vibes, right? Like late 90s boy band vibes. I know. I was trying to do the Joe Burrow, but I don't know if it worked out.
Well, NSYNC is far superior than 98 Degrees. Like,
thanks.
That guy's hosting Love Is Blind now, so
yeah,
it kind of shows you what he's been up to.
Shout out to the Lachey brothers.
But chat, get your final questions in there. We're just going to be live for
Someone
a few more
says,
minutes.
why does AJ Preller always mention Sasaki's name? Wonder if they know for sure he's joining them. They even invite him for Game 4, which is what I talked about. Yeah. You talk about him because people love to be talked about. They love hearing their name. People want to be wanted, right? They want to be desired. They want to be obsessed over. And so the Padres are doing their very best at doing that. And I'm sure courting Roki is that way. Again, Otani wanted to win. If Otani didn't want to win and put his money where his mouth was, he wouldn't have signed with the Dodgers. But if you looked at his goals when he was in high school at like 14, 15 years old, he had him winning 3 World Series, winning the Cy Young, having kids. Like, he's a little bit behind now on that than his original trajectory with his goal plan. But when you have those goals and those desires, then you can't make the playoffs in 6 years with the Angels, then you go to a team that's going to be able to win the World Series. And he did it. And he did in his first year when he wasn't even pitching, which is even more crazy. So and we know from Roki, he wants to be the best pitcher in the world. And if you want to do that, I'm no offense to the Padres, but the Padres are not a global brand the way the Dodgers and the Yankees are. And so I think just if you go through his words and read between the lines, you can kind of see it, right? Where he might end up and what he wants to do. And so the Dodgers are moving in silence, and they've been doing it for years, and they're doing it again here. They did it with Yamamoto. They did it with Otani originally. So I think the Padres are doing whatever they can to try to level the playing field here, letting you, Darvish, recruit him and court him because they're close friends. But really, it's just going to come down to what Roki wants to do. So, but that's why Preller keeps putting his name in my mouth to mention Will Smith and Chris Rock at the Oscars.
We talk about all the big names, but what the Dodgers typically do in their fashion is they sign off the wall names, especially when it comes to their bullpen. And they're going to have to replenish the bullpen because guys like Daniel Hudson are retiring. Joe Kelly's probably a goner. I imagine they do their best to try to re-sign Blake Trinan. But I was looking at some of the names earlier today of who's available. The big fish are like Tanner Scott and Clay Holmes. I don't know if they're going to sign either of those guys, but I could see them kind of getting weird and maybe courting a guy like Michael Soroka and adding him to the
interesting.
bullpen.
That's a name I wasn't sure of. Let me plug in my laptop while you keep asking. Also, I want to shout out my boy Chris Camello, who posted a question in this chat. Chris and I are close. Chris, Farhan Zaidi is probably the smartest man I've ever met. Forget baseball executive, just smartest man I've ever met. He's an MIT grad in the Dodgers fantasy football league, which is like the whole team. And usually sometimes it was like 2 or 3 players managing one team. When Farhan was still with the Dodgers, the general manager, he won like 3 years in a row. He was unbeatable when it came to fantasy football. And you guys all know how hard and random, especially with injuries, fantasy football is. So for a guy to win that many years in a row is like a genius he is. 100% you want him in the organization. Now you don't have the general manager spot available anymore. And he just went from being like president of baseball operations with the Giants, like Andrew Friedman's role. So if he's willing to come in as an advisor like Anthopoulos was before moving on to another team, 100%. You want as many, in this case, you want as many cooks in the kitchen when they're smart baseball minds, and there's nobody smarter than Zaidi. Hold on, let me plug this in.
Yeah. I don't think we need Farhan, but maybe Farhan could go to the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't think Mike can comment on that because he might get in trouble with who's currently in charge with the Lakers front office. But if the Lakers are looking, maybe Farhan could come to the Los Angeles Lakers. He might do a better job, in my opinion. What's up, Ang? I'll get to your comment right now. Dodgers already have a World Series winning lineup. Just sign all our free agents, but let Flaherty walk. Sign Tanner Scott and get Sasaki, and we're good. It sounds like a good plan, Ang. Hit that like button, everyone, while you're listening. Get your final questions in here. We're about to close out the show in 5 minutes or so, so I want to make sure we get to any of your guys' Dodgers questions. But yeah, in typical fashion, I'm expecting the big free agents to go off the board first, position player wise, along with starting pitchers. And then typically relievers kind of fall next in line. Kenley Jansen's out there. Kirby Yates is out there. Those are 2 names I could see the Dodgers probably going after. They kind of make sense on 1-year deals.
Maybe I could see a Kenley reunion, but to me, I think they want one more high leverage guy. And I don't know if Kenley would still be considered in that category. Tanner Scott definitely is. Isn't Jeff Hoffman from the Phillies available?
He is, but
Trinan, you need to re-sign if he wants to. I don't know. I'm sure Trinan's had the best week of his life the last week. So, Paul Sewald, closer for the Diamondbacks, who kind of struggled at the end of the season. He's a guy.
Devin Williams is on the market.
That's an interesting one. Yeah. I mean, that's one where the Dodgers might think you can get him a kind of low because of that one bad game he had that knocked him out of the playoffs. But shoot, I want the airbender on my team. So I think they want one high leverage guy. I think they want one starting pitcher, big name starting pitcher, whether it's Sasaki, Fried, Burns, Snell, like we talked about. I think they want one high leverage reliever, whether it's Scott or Hoffman or Holmes, like you mentioned, or Sewald, some of these guys, Kenley, maybe. Yimi Garcia is another guy I told you I thought they might be able to acquire. You know, he's been pretty good since he left. He could be a guy because he knows the system. They like bringing guys back, so he could be a good name. One of those guys, and I think they want Teoscar back. And if they can't get Teoscar back, then they're going to look for another big outfielder, corner outfielder that can play one of those positions. I don't buy the Juan Soto being in on Juan Soto as much as most people. I think obviously when it's a player like Juan Soto, you're interested. The Dodgers were interested in trading for him when he went to San Diego at the deadline, I think in 2022. So it makes sense. But I think with the money he's going to command and the money they've already kind of outset, and if you want to bring Teo back, I don't see it all happening. So if he's still unsigned, let's say like heading into January or whatever, and Teo goes elsewhere and, you only end up getting Sasaki as the pitcher that you wanted and you get one reliever and, you need something else, maybe then you spend that big bucks. But right now I don't think so necessarily.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. I think they're going to sign 2 starting pitchers and probably try to re-sign one of Walker Buehler or Flaherty, although I think it's pretty unlikely Flaherty comes back. But they're going with the 6-man rotation. They're going to need arms. a lot of these guys who they're counting on are either injury prone or just coming back from injuries, like Sheehan and Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin.
Yep.
So it's really hard to count on them to be
Is Sheehan even gonna
reliable.
be back, like, start for
Maybe
opening day? I
maybe
doubt
mid
it.
season,
Yeah,
mid.
like, after trade deadline is probably or right around the All-Star break because he went under the knife for Tommy John, like, early this year, like, what, April, May, so
Yep. And Otani won't be back in time for opening day. Who knows if he even pitches by May? They might really ease him in. So I think they're going to add 3 pitchers, whether it's
wow, okay.
yep, whether it's re-signing a guy and then 2 out of the house. But they're going to add 3 pitchers, in my opinion, to whatever they currently have on their roster. You can't trust Kershaw because he's undergoing multiple surgeries again as well.
I agree.
Glass now can't stay healthy, and I think they're going to approach him differently next season. Yamamoto missed 3 months, so it's just a lot of question marks. As good as these guys are when they're on the field, there's just so many question marks with their health and durability. I think the Dodgers are going to realize they have to bolster up on starting pitching, and that's how they're going to approach that. And in terms of
I'm
the
gonna throw
bull,
some other names at you. They're not the high names, but they're still guys the Dodgers have been interested in the past. Nathan
Mhm,
Eovaldi, Shane Bieber.
mhm.
Um, I don't
I,
know. Is Scherzer gonna be available? I don't know if they wanna bring him back at that age,
I
but
would not bring him back.
I don't see it. But these are just guys like that know the system, that they've liked, that they've had before in the past. So I could kind of see it. Frankie Montas, that's another guy. He was a guy they traded for. They had him, but he never played with the team, but they liked him in the past. I think Ross Stripling's a free agent again. They love that he's versatile.
I'll pass. He's
I know, but you're talking about 3 guys, and so, we have the group A guys, like the plan A through D guys, probably another guy in that range, and then the guys I just mentioned as maybe your third kind of guy, your depth guy or rehab or reclamation project kind of guy.
Shane Bieber, someone I've thought about. He might ultimately cost a little too much unless he takes a 1-year deal, but he would make sense on kind of a let's get my career back on track and then go back out in the free agent market a year from now. I like Shane Bieber, local guy, as well, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Santa Barbara, I think
Yep.
he went.
Yep.
So he'd be cool. But yeah, I think we've covered all the pitchers. Bullpen, I don't expect them to overpay, and really that's why I said I don't think they're going to get Tanner Scott. They don't need to. They find their guys that no one expects to do anything, and then they turn them into legit relievers. So that's why I said don't sleep on Soroka. This is a guy that once was very talented for the Atlanta Braves. I think they see something in him and could get his career back on track.
Yeah, and they could always trade and get a guy to throw in a guy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and I think Kopech is still under contract, so he's coming back, and that's huge piece, you know what I'm saying? If you lose Trinan but still have Kopech and Gratterall and Vesia and those guys, that's huge too. Is Joe Kelly's deal done? I think Joe Kelly's
He's a
a
free
free agent,
agent.
and he might not be a guy they bring back anymore, I don't think. Um Yeah, so they're talking about Crochet. Yeah, they're gonna be interested, and they're gonna be in those talks to try to get Crochet. I'm looking in the chat here. Adames, yes, I can see them trying to go after Adames. Instead of having to trade for him this time, you can just sign him outright. Now, the interesting thing was there were talks like the Mets wanted Adames, and they wanted him to play third base. And then at first it was like he doesn't want to do that. And now the reports are coming out that he will be willing to do that. I think they do that so they don't limit his market. You know what I mean? So, like, you don't want the Mets, who have the biggest spender out there, you don't want him out. By the way, I can see Walker Buehler going to a team like the Mets. And I know people don't want to hear that, but the Mets are looking at it like, we need a guy that performs in the postseason like that. We need a guy that rises in those moments. And, Steve Cohen can pay him. He can outbid the Dodgers for a Walker Buehler if that's what he wants to do.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, if they sign Roki Sasaki, they might be okay with letting Walker Buehler go, unfortunately. Mike Lopez bring up Jesus Luzardo. He really struggled for Miami last season. I know he was dealing with an abundant amount of injuries, had a 5 ERA. I do feel like Miami could be a trade partner sneakily with the Dodgers. If Alcantara is out there on the market, they might go after him. But
you also forget they're looking at Bobby Miller as a guy they can have bounce back too. Like, we're not even talking about him, but this was their game 2 starter in the NLDS last year and
Yeah.
was a shell of himself in his sophomore season. That's a guy they want to bring back. Or if they think they can dangle him as part of a trade to get a guy like a Crochet, maybe that's something that you look at as well. I'm not sure. Or for a high leverage arm, you know what I mean? Like we were talking about that as well. So
Yeah.
that's a guy named, but I think they want him in the rotation for the depth that he can provide and bring.
Yeah, no, you're right. I forgot about Bobby Miller, but I definitely see him as a bounce back candidate. I mentioned that in previous streams. I do think the Dodgers still have faith in this guy, and they're going to try to do everything they can to bring him back to form. It's the other guys like Nick Frasso, Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, who have already dealt with a number of injuries. Not sure yet if the Dodgers will bring them back or dangle them in trades, whether it's to get some more prospects or a win now guy. But yeah, I mean, it's 11:30 now. It's getting late. I appreciate everyone here tuning in. Michael, want to be sensitive to your time. Is there anything else you want to cover or final thoughts you want to get there out on the airwaves before we sign off tonight?
No, and the real thing, and there was one other question in there was, do we know if Sasaki will get posted before December 15th or not? I think yes. And I think if it does happen before then, it bodes really well for the Dodgers. I think Sasaki asking to get posted, the team obliging him in this already tells me he already kind of knows what he wants to do and where he wants to go. And so I think it happens before the 15th, and we'll all kind of be privy to that same thing because that domino really needs to fall for not only the Dodgers, but the Padres, right? Like if Sasaki goes to the Padres, I can see the Dodgers then increasing and going after Snell. And if the Dodgers get Sasaki, I could see the Padres wanting to bring back Snell and go big on Snell. So there's a lot of different moving pieces here, but I think Sasaki and where he decides to go is going to be an important part of all this, and it needs to fall first. I don't know about Alex Friedman, but I think Dalton Rushing is ready. I think he's making the roster next year. Yeah, I agree with Mike Lopez. Yeah. I don't know about Alcantara getting traded. Obviously, he's coming back from TJ. And I think the Marlins taking away Clayton McCullough. By the way, one last thing, you talked about that. When the Dodgers tweet out, like, thank you, Clayton, for the 10 years or whatever, like, our heart sinks because we only really think one Clayton when it comes to the Dodgers, and that's Kershaw. But shout out to first base coach Clayton McCullough, who's going to go manage the Marlins. I can't see him wanting to lose all these great arms like Luzardo and Alcantara as soon as he arrives. And I know that's a work in progress over there, but it's the same thing. If these guys are going to be back and can do anything with them healthy, he's going to want them there.
Counter to that is he might want a couple Dodgers players that he was just coaching and give them a little bit of comfort. So there might be some partnership and leverage there that the Dodgers might be able to work out. Gavin Lux, you might be in Miami. We'll see.
That's another one. Yeah. A la Corey Seager going to the Rangers to team up with old Dodgers coach. So.
All right. Well, I know we got other questions here, but it's getting late, and we'll get to your questions, guys, next episode. Appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Hit that like button if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet. Appreciate you guys hitting that subscribe button. Will mean a lot, and we'll cover the Dodgers all off season long and keep you up to date on all the off season rumors. If you're not following Michael yet, please give him a follow. He's all over social media. Just look at him up. Michael J. Duarte. He's covering the Dodgers, the Lakers, the Rams, all your Los Angeles sports teams for NBC LA, and he does the best work out there. Michael, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Appreciate all your insight and coverage.
You got it, guys. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you. All right. Peace out, everyone.